All right, good evening, everybody. I am going to go through some more of CSS, in this case, formatting text. All of these slides have been posted already. This is just kind of me going through and giving you a little extra so you can actually see it happening. You can at least see a lecture. But you should be able to complete the assignments with the PowerPoints that are up and online already. So let's talk about formatting text here. And you remember we played around in the last video with font family. We changed things like Times New Roman to Palatino Linotype, or we decided to use Comic Sans MS just so that we can see the changes that happen by adding different bits of CSS rules onto our pages. So the first thing we need to do here is we need to make sure that we're in the summer of 20. This is one of those times, by the way, when it might help you to open up a duplicate session. And let me log in here real quick. It's the same thing as just opening up your original window. It's just you've got two viewpoints on the Odin server. So it's too late. All right, let's try this again. You do have a time limit entering your password, and I didn't know if I had gone over that time limit. I kind of lose track of it every once in a while I'm talking. So in this case, we're going to go to public_HTML. Remember that you guys will be there. I'm going to the summer of 20 because that is where I keep all of our files for the class that we're attending here at UNO in the summertime. Now, that would be okay if I were just looking at S12 S03 dot. For crying out. Let's try S14 S01.html. We'll get to that here in a bit. This is just a very, very simple page. And if you notice, it's all contained in a header, 2 sections, and a footer. And we'll get to that here a little bit later, or maybe on another video. But this is, you guys think of it as one of your assignment directories, perhaps. Now, let's quit out of that. Anyway, I don't want to be on the HTML place. Instead, I want to do this. I want to cd into my CSS directory. And if you look now, I've got a ton of stuff coming up here. And this is, I've pre-prepped, and this is all of the small CSS files that we'll need to play with today. So let's try vimming b.css. And we're going to see this again, by the way. In this case, what I've got is an external CSS page, right? We talked about that briefly at the end of the last video lecture. And all we've basically got here is 2 rules. Please don't color your page this way, because this says on this page, I want the body's background to be red. I want every place where there's a paragraph within a section to have a blue background with a 70% transparency, and I want the color of the text to be 0, or excuse me, yellow. That is not really a great page, but it makes a point that you can do anything that you want with CSS. So I'm going to back to a particular one here. There we go. And we're going to go back over here to the summer of 20, and the index that I am using for this is index set 12. There we go. Index set 12.html. And I just realized today, again, that I don't have these links caught up on my page, and I will make sure I get that done before I get this back tonight. So what we're going to do first of all, though, is let's open up that specific page. Now, instead of index layout here, I'm going to copy this. And I'm going to open another window. Oh no, I've already got it there. So here we go. External CSS sample pages. Remember that you can always come down in one of these example pages, right click, view page source, and you can see the HTML that created it. This is not, you know, some kind of super duper beautiful web page. It is just a simple page to hold the links to the examples that I've done for the class lectures. And all it has is a very, very simple link to that particular file that's in the same directory as the page exists, which is, again, over here. Whoops. I don't have to do that again. All I have to do is back up, and there's the Lecture 12 HTML pages. So let's bring the slides out, and let's see what kind of trouble we can get in today with our CSS. So again, as I started to mention here, we talked about the font family property quite a bit as we were playing with specific CSS options in the last introduction video. What the font family property does is it allows us to set a preferred set of fonts so that a page is delivered in that specific font if that font is present on the user's machine. Now, the most common set of fonts are there in that second bullet point. Arial is a non-serif font, whereas you can see the difference there with Times New Roman, which is a serif font. Now, most of you, unless you're English majors, probably don't really know the difference. And it's quite easy. And that is, let's make this bigger here. So if you see Arial, for example, compare that with Georgia. Georgia is another one of our serif fonts. And you can see it right there on the T in Times as well. Those have these little dangly bits that are there to help differentiate letters like lowercase l and capital I from each other. There's the lowercase l. Let's see, can we make that an uppercase? Yeah, we can do that. Done it. Oh, I still have the dialog box open. Can you tell the difference between the capital I in the middle of Arial and the lowercase l? Not really. That's why a lot of websites stick with Times New Roman or a similar serif font. But those supposedly look kind of old-fashioned, so a lot of people as well choose Arial. It really, I think, comes down to a choice for you and your sites. I think the default font, the last time I checked on most computers right now, is Times New Roman. I believe the default size of that font is 16 point in the browser window. I'll have to check that again. I haven't checked that in a few years. So the font family property allows us to do something like Arial, Arial Black, Comic Sans MS, or Impact. So it gives us the choice to put a list of different fonts in our CSS rule. You can also have a generic name, and that's what's down there at the bottom. Oops. And that is the serif. You went one too many there. Serif, sans serif, cursive, fantasy, or monospace. My personal preference is that none of you use cursive or fantasy. I've been told anecdotally, and I don't know whether I believe this or not, I really haven't done any research on it, that some schools are no longer teaching cursive handwriting and reading. I can believe it. I can remember as a child in, second grade, first grade, sitting down with 3 sheets of lined paper and having to write the cursive G or the cursive B over and over and over again. And that was part of our school day. I would love to see that nobody ever uses it anymore except perhaps for their signature. But the reason I say not to use it is because you're building web pages for a world audience. And it is difficult for people that don't speak English as a first language to be able to read cursive English. Likewise, fantasy. Anything that does not present your text, your thoughts in a clear, easy to read manner in English, for us anyway, I don't think is proper to be used more than minimally on a website. And I think we'll, maybe on the next video, I'll show you some Algerian or something. Take a look at the Algerian font in Microsoft Word at some point and type a sentence out with it, and then immediate below it, go to Times New Roman and type the same sentence and see which one is easier to read. So let's take a look at this in practice. So basically our web page is just a small section. You look up here, here's our link to our external spreadsheet, which is the last thing we talked about in the video last time. We're going to look in our CSS directory for ff.css. That ends the head, okay? Then we open the body, we open a section, and our text is an H1, so a header called the little red pill. The red pill offers you a chance to enter the real world, and then in small text, the red pill will allow you to stay in Wonderland and find out how deep the rabbit hole goes. We close the small text, we close this section. So all we're doing here in our CSS, the FF stands for font family, and in our body text, we're going to have Times New Roman or a serif replacement. In our H1, we're going to make it Comic Sans MS, and it should be the sans serif font if we don't have Comic Sans MS installed. So let's take a look at that in practice here. Let me get back to, where the hell are we? Here we go. Let's make it big enough to read for everybody. And you'll note that we've got Comic Sans MS for our little red pill, which is our H1. And then we turn to what I would consider normal text by doing Times New Roman. Now remember from the last time we talked about the small tag, all it really does is reduce a font size to about 75% of the standard font. So there's really not visually a heck of a lot of difference. And if your eyesight is bad, there may be no difference when you're using the small font, or excuse me, the small tags. CSS will allow us to do this better, and that's part of what we're going to talk about today. So I'm going to get rid of this, and let's go on to the next one. So font style. allows us to set basically an italic style tag. Font style has 4 properties. Remember, it's a property value. So font style gives us the chance to use normal, which takes whatever font style we have set for everything else in that particular section out, and it makes it just appear normal text. You know, if you wanted to emphasize something in an italicized paragraph, what you could do is just take the word property right there, and with everything else italicized, you say property with a span tag is normal. So it would appear the way it does here, while everything else would be italicized. We can do italic, we can do oblique, which supposedly, you know, kind of leans it over just a little bit more than italic. But most fonts that I've seen don't have a setting for oblique letters. You can certainly try it. It should default to an italic if the font does not have a setting of oblique letters that it can show, or inherit. And all that means is that if we're in a section inside of a div tag, for example, and the div tag specifies the font style property, we will inherit that div style. It's like our grandfather or grandmother. The section that we're in is our mother or father, and then we are the ones, the font style property in a paragraph, for example. And the paragraph would be the child tag of the section and the grandchild tag of the div. So let's see what we're going to do with these. Again, we're not going to change this HTML5 page until later, so it's going to be the very same page. What we're going to do here, however, is we're going to hit our font family with Times New Roman or serif again for our body, our H1, our header, and that small section with the, you know, find out how deep the rabbit hole goes, is going to be a font style of italic. So what I want to do is pull this down a little bit. Let's go back to our pages. I'm sorry, I've got the, let's go back here. There we go. So here's that was the first slide. Remember, all we did there was, you know, change the fonts around. 1205 gives us the opportunity to set this up to our normal, whatever that is, Times New Roman on my machine. But it allows us to give the H1 and the small tag italicized text. And again, that's all because inside of that CSS file, we've got font style : italic. That's all we have to do. Now, if I come here and view the page source on this, remember that you should be able to go up into your link tag, and remember this is the only place the link tag exists is in the head. You never ever have a link tag sending you to a different page. But notice that here we've got CSS FS, or excuse me, FA, pardon me. And if we click on that, I don't even have to open the CSS directory because I can see that CSS right there. If for some reason the CSS doesn't display out here, that's my first stop to check what's going on. So again, all I do, right click, or you can do Control U, it's up to you, view page source, and then click on CSS and whatever the name of the CSS is. And if it can't find the CSS file, that's the first place to check for problems. So let's get rid of these. And let's go back to the slides. And yes, I know I could do this as a slideshow, but sometimes it's a pain in the butt. So now, since we talked about italicized, let's talk about bold. Now, remember, bold in this case is just for making things pretty. If you want to use strong or EM, that's a specific set of tags that work towards uh, helping people who are blind understand that this particular series of words is emphasized by the author of the page. But font weight gives us the visual look. So the font weight property, look at that. It's got 100 million values in it. You can do 100 through 900. You can do normal, which is just like what we talked about in font style. Basically, we turn the bold off by doing normal. You can do bold. Font weight bold gives us just the standard bold value, and that's probably going to be the one that you're going to use most. Again, most of the fonts that I've seen created don't have them specifically weighted like this, so you'll just default to normal bold. Likewise, the lighter and the bolder, I haven't seen a lot of fonts use those either. But what we're going to do is use font weight bold so you can see how that affects visually the text that we're going to wrap it around. Again, no changes in the HTML. I will note that the only change actually is we're digging into fw.css, which is something different. So body, font family, Times New Roman or serif. Our small text is we're going to add font style to make it italic and font weight to make it bold. So we're going to do both of those at the same time. Let's minimize this. Let's go back here and do slide 12.7. And you will notice as soon as the line goes away, little red pill is our H1. It's always bold like that for any H1. The red pill offers you a chance to enter the real world. It's just normal text again. But our note down there, our small tagged text, is both bolded and italicized. So that's a good thing. It gives you a little bit of visual representation of bold or italic if you're not trying to really emphasize words to someone. Let's go back into our set of slides here again. So this is where we start getting to the main idea of being able to control the text that we have on the page. Yeah, font weight, bold, and font style are changing the way we display the text on the page, but font size is, in my opinion, the place we start actually taking control. Font size, you get to specify a size for the text that you place on the screen. So we usually measure it in pixels. And we've done that with our image files, for example, before, right? So if we use pixels as part of our value, we remember we need to, I don't know if I'd use the term validate, but we need to make sure, like old story problems from middle school, that we delineate what that number means by adding a notation to it. In this case, 16px. Now, that is an exact size. A relative size we can use as a percentage. So I could do font size colon 150%, and that would give me, well, 1.5 times the current font, and we can rock and roll with that. So if you had a 16-point font or a 16-pixel font, and I said I want it to be 150%, that font, split it down the half, and then add it to 16, you're going to get 24-point font, or 24-pixel font, pardon me. I keep saying points. I've been doing Word documents today. And M, and I think I mentioned this in the last video, used to be the size, well, it still is really, the size of the width of the capital M in the language, or the font rather, that's on the screen. So 1.125 M's would give you basically the same thing as 112.5%. I think you can see mathematically what we're working on. 1 EM is the same as the 16 pixels or 100%. It's the natural size of the text as it's got in the bullet point down there. And again, most systems and browsers display default text at 16 pixels. And I think I messed up the other time I was talking about this and actually said points again. Points are the size of the type that you might use in a printing press. So like newspaper headings and all of the text basically in a newspaper used to be done with metal type. So you'd have to set the type so that when you printed it, like the Gutenberg press, it would come out at the size that you wanted. If you want your text to be 24 pixels, divide 24 by 16 and you get 1.5. Excuse me, 16 by 24. You get 1.5. So you'd set the style text or style the text at 1.5 ems or 150%. This is probably the most difficult math that you're going to have in our class this semester. So let's take a look at the next one down. Again, we are not changing the text. We're still sticking with the little red pill. But here, our small, we're going to tag a font size of 50% on that. So it should go from 16 pixel font down to 8 pixel font. Our paragraph, on the other hand, we're going to increase the font size to 1.5 ems, and we're going to make the font weight bold. Now, the cool thing is, if you take a look at our H1 and our paragraph in the next thing I show you, you should be able to draw a pretty good conclusion about really what those things are talking about. Doggone it, I went too far. That's the one I want. Yep. So 12.9 is what we're at. Now, I did add one line here. I added the default text size. But you'll notice that the note down here, the small text, you know, you could get a ruler out, put it up against the screen and measure it exactly, but just eyeballing it, it looks like it's half the size of the default text size, which is why I put that there. Now notice at 150% in bold, I really can't tell the difference visually between our paragraph and our H1. So if you don't want to use H1s for some reason, now you know how to make the text look like an H1. I don't think I'd bother to change it unless there was something specific you wanted to do there, but now you know what an H1 looks like in terms of CSS. So let's go ahead and kill that one, and we'll go back to the slides here. The next thing we're going to talk about is our font variant. Now, font variant is basically a way that we can play around with the font without having to go in and change something. And what we're going to use with font variant is small caps. Remember, if you get confused on these, all you've got to do is go to the W3 Schools or go to Google and type in W3 Schools font variant CSS. And it will take you straight to the W3 Schools discussion page about that particular CSS rule, its property and values, all of that. So normal again says, I don't care what everything else in this particular tag is, but for this word or for this part of it, or even maybe for this tag in a section where everything else is small caps, I want it to be normal. Small caps takes little case, small case, and turns it into small capital letters rather than having the small font there. And then inherit, of course, just like before when I talked about the grands, the parents, and that particular tag, that's the same explanation for inherit here. So again, I want to minimize that, and I want to come back out here. Let's do 12.11. And what you are going to see here is everything that we had on the slide. Let's do this. Let's view the page source, hit that. So what we've got here is small caps. Now I did change a couple things here in the paragraph. I made the paragraph 1.153 EM and did the font weight of 700. But again, the particular font that we have in, or that I have actually on this machine, doesn't support the font weight of 800 and whatever it is. But if you look down at the small text, you will see what font variant small caps does. Instead of being red like it is up here in the paragraph, it is small capital letters. We still have capitalization going on with the first word, like the N in note and the T and the W in Wonderland for that matter. But every other letter in there, rather than small case, is small caps instead. Again, it's kind of a cool way to be able to take over the screen and display what you want to display. Let's go back to the set of slides here for 12. And we're going to go down and we're going to talk, whoops, we already talked about that. We're going to use the font family, the font property. Now, the cool thing about using just font is you can set all the properties at one time. So the format is this: font, style, weight, variant, size, and whatever families you want. Families should be separated by a comma, and if they have space, like Comic Sans MS, quotes, double or single around the font name. It should be placed in this order. But if you don't specify, a style, that's fine. You just leave it blank, font weight bold, font variant small caps, font size, you just have 250 pixels. You don't name them the way I just did so you could understand what we're talking about here. All you do is put the values down. So font, whatever you want for a style, whatever you want for a weight. Again, these are the values, not the properties. The variant value, the size value, and the family's value or values. So let's show you what I mean. Again, same stuff up there, but here we're using font. And what we're going to do is our italic, font weight bold, variant is small caps. Our size is 75% of the normal text size on the screen. And then we have either Times New Roman or serif, our families in a comma delimited list. That's what that comma is there. Our small text, we're going to use font, but we're only going to specify a size and a font family, in this case, Comic Sans MS. So let's go back in here, that page 13. Let's take a look at it. So again, my paragraph is now at 70%, and it's italicized and it's bolded and all of that fun stuff. The only thing we did here with the small text is we changed its size a little bit and we printed out our text in Times New Roman. The H1 didn't have any style to it, so it didn't need to be changed. And again, if you want to look at it from the live point of view, if for some reason the CSS isn't showing right, click back, view the page source, and you should be able to click on the link and get straight to your CSS file wherever it lives. Let's get rid of that. And let's go on with the rest of 12. And now we're going to talk about color. And we've already done that many, many times. We talked about the RGB properties. We've talked about hexadecimal properties. And I've shown you the W3 Schools color names as well. We did mention a little bit about the 4 different kinds of values that we can put in. Color changes the foreground. In other words, the letters, the numbers, basically anything that your font puts on the screen. For us, that's where we're going to kind of go, and we're going to leave it there. Remember, we can use one of the now 160 predefined color names. We can do hexadecimal, we can do RGB, or we can do RGBA. Now notice whether we're using hex, RGB, or RGBA, you are getting all of those in the same format: red color, green color, blue color. Pound, red, red, green, green, blue, blue, gives us a value in each one of those from 0 to F in base 16 notation, hexadecimal notation. Using RGB, we go from 0 to 255 in red, green, and blue. If we wanted blue, for example, just the standard ordinary blue, we would have 0, 0, 255 in RGB. In hexadecimal, remember the highest number is F, so we would go 0, 0 for red, 0, 0 for green, F, F, Frank, Frank for the blue. Now, the only difference between RGB and RGBA is it has a fourth notation there, which will specify how transparent the color appears. I think we did the example the other day with teal, and we set it to 30% transparency or opacity, and it was barely visible on the screen. It was just kind of the lightest touch as far as text is concerned. So let's go in here and see what we're doing. Again, we're not changing this yet. We're looking for C.CSS, and C.CSS says our H1 should have a font variant of small caps, and a color should be red. Please note that I screwed up because I was writing Java when I did these slides. That's actually the / are Java comment. But the commented text behind it say, if you want pure red, it's pound FF and then 4 zeros. FF is red, red, 0, 0 for green, 0, 0 for blue. Same thing with RGB, except it goes from 0 to 255. And RGBA is 255, again for the red, and then 1 stands for 100% transparency, or opacity in this case, really, because that means that you will be able to see the red as bright brown red. Down there in our paragraph, does anybody figure out what color they're going to be in the paragraph? So remember, it's RGB, red, green, blue, and if we've got 0 for red, 0 for green, the text color in our paragraph is going to be solid blue, except it's going to be faded out just a little bit because we've got a 0.7 there for our A factor. Now that stands for alpha transparency, but we've talked about that before. You should probably just have that memorized. I don't even stop really to think about what its name is when I utilize the RGBA colors. I just know that that's a percentage that gives me a percentage of that color. So let's minimize that again. Let's come down here and check out slide 1215. So the little red pill is our H1. Our CSS says, hey, make that red. Our paragraph gives us kind of a faded solid blue. If we took the 70% out and made it a 1 instead, it would be solid, real blue. And then we didn't change anything with our CSS for the small text. We're basically using small text here as an excuse to have another tag to style, but that's really where it's at. All right, so let's go ahead and get this up here again. Now, the next thing we need to talk about here is what we do with IDs and classes. Now, remember that when I talk about a class, I'm not talking about a course like, our course. What I'm talking about in HTML and CSS is a way that we can utilize something more than once. The first thing I told you about ID and classes to remember was that an ID is unique on a page. If I have an ID equaling about me, I cannot have another ID equals about me in a div tag or a section tag. On the opposite hand, if I set up a class Now, I can have as many classes, class equals blog post, for example. I can have as many of those set up to style a blog post as I want to. So classes can be used multiple times on the same page. IDs can only be used once. Now, the way we make a selector, a CSS rule, instead of having a tag like the div tag or the body tag, what we're going to do is create a separate kind of code in CSS for IDs and classes. So a class name, like class equals blog post in your HTML5 code, we would put a dot blog post as the selector for our CSS rule. If we wanted to have div ID equals about me, well, in order to create a CSS rule for about me, which is a unique ID, we put a # in front of that as the selector in the CSS. And you can see examples of that right down at the bottom of the visible page right now. .class name is somewhere on our HTML5 page. It says class equals class name. So we've set that up with a color so our text is red. #ID name or hashtag ID name, it's the same character, it's just a difference in generations. That can only be used once. Remember, an ID is only once, it's unique. But in this case, we've set up with ID name and the # symbol as our selector. Our rule is color :green. So our class names are red, our IDs are green. And that is, if you use it in a div style, that's everything in the div is going to have a color of red or a color of green. Now, we can get kind of funky here. If we have a section that has a class called class name, it's going to overwrite the color red with the color teal. If we have an article in which we have a #ID name, we're going to overwrite the green with yellow. This is about as complicated as we're going to set up our CSS rules. And you really, as long as you have plenty of names in your head, you don't really have to do it this way if you don't want to. It is the way that most professionals work, but right now you're students, you're not professionals, so I don't expect you to do things that way. So here's what we're going to do. We are changing our HTML code a little bit. So what we're going to do is just set up a section with a class of fave sites and set up 3 links. And everybody should know about links by now. So we've got a paragraph that says, here are some sites I like to visit in plain text. Then we've got 3 anchor tags there so that our link goes to ist.unomaha.edu or Facebook or Twitter. Now, one thing you might notice, keep your eyes open when we show this the page, is the and that little comma there is still inside of the paragraph. So the text up here, the and the comma should be a different color. So my .fave sites, the color is teal. And, well, let's just see it. That's probably going to be easier than me trying to describe something that's easier seen. So 1217 shows us all of the text, including, well, I forgot that comma. That comma's blue. That's right. Never mind. Here's some sites I like to visit. The IS&T website, Facebook, and Twitter. But the and the period and the text are part of the paragraph. Okay. I think the problem is here. Let's see if we can get into it. Let's do Twitter instead. I forgot my www there. And my computer is running horribly slow tonight, but you get the picture. We've got the link, it works, and it goes straight to the Twitter page, like you would expect a link to work. So remember, a class can be used multiple times. An ID can be used only once. An ID requires pound or hashtag notation in front of the selector. So pound about me. A class requires dot notation in CSS. So dot blog post, something along those lines. So let's roll down here to the next set. Here's where we're getting kind of funky. These are, again, they're compound selectors. What the first one says, section P, says that anywhere I have a section and inside of that section I have a paragraph, that paragraph alone should be colored silver. The one below it says article.classname. We saw that a little bit before. That means wherever there's an article that has a class called class name, and if there's a span within the class of class name, the text should be yellow. Let's see what we got in the example. Again, when you get into some of these heavier duty selectors, sometimes it's hard to see. But what we've got here is we've added, after we close the section, just one more paragraph to kind of delineate the difference between the paragraph with our links in it and the paragraph that has, oh, excuse me, we've got a list item up here. So we did the, where the devil is it? There we go. We've got an ordered list up there. So we'll have 1, 2, 3 for each one of their links. Anyway, where it says fave sites, the paragraph, our color will be red. Where it says an ordered link, our color will be teal. And remember, when we talk about color, we're talking basically about the foreground, the letters in our case. So this is 19. So our paragraph in this is red because that's what we told it to be. We've already gone to Twitter. I hate Facebook. Let's go to Twitter again. So there, you notice we've got the Twitter, hey, hold on, I'm loading bird. So the link works. I'm gonna go back there here real quick. The teal is for anything in my ordered list. I guess we didn't place the anchor text in the ordered list. It really didn't look that close. But inside of our ordered list, we have list item. And we could certainly have placed the links inside the list item. We've already done that for one of the assignments. So let's kill that. Let's go back to the slides. So we're going to talk about the background property. And again, just like foreground color, the background dash color says I can change just the color of my background to be, again, you know, one of the predefined color names, the hex, the RGB, or the RGBA notation. So what we're going to do here is we're going to stick with the little red pill here for a minute. Please don't build, sorry about that, don't build your pages like this. So the entire body is going to have a background of red. Each place where we have a section with a paragraph in it is going to have a background of 00255, so that's blue with 70% transparency. And our foreground color is going to be yellow. This page is hideous. If I take no responsibility for your eyes bleeding. Wow, I'm having lag issues. Yeah, see, that's pretty awful. Don't ever, in my opinion, use a saturated color as your background color. There are many different colors out there in the world, millions upon millions. And that renders having that solid bright red just off. Wow, my eyes had to blink there for a minute and reset. Let's make this bigger again. So now we want to talk about something special. We can do pretty fun stuff with these. These are pseudo classes. And this is the one that I was worried about. I should have put this on the last video, but I didn't. So that's why you're getting the 2 extra days on the deadline for the HTML5 assignment 5 rather. So pseudo classes exist in all of your documents. You don't have to do anything special to make them work. So we're going to talk about 4 different pseudo classes. We're going to talk about modifying our anchor tags. Our link is the link as it appears on a page. By default, that is blue with an underline. And then when you visit it, it's going to be purple with an underline. So anchor:link gives us the opportunity to set that color to something else. Anchor:visited means that once we've been there and come back, we can change that to something else. So instead of being blue and purple, if you have a dark background for your page, you could make it white and like a wheat colored yellow. Anchor:hover is the color it changes to just when your left mouse is over the top of it. And in this case, it's going to be teal, right? Oh no, it's going to be purple, pardon me. Now, anchor or active is what the color is when you actually press the left button down on the link. So link is the normal color as it sits in the page. Visited is the color that it looks like after you've visited the link. Hover is when you've got your mouse over it. And then active is when you actually click on the link, the color will change as well. So let's see what we're going to do here. So we're going to kind of make our menu items here a little bit easier to see. But otherwise, it's just that same series of anchor tags for your links in the page. Now, again, we're going to do just basically simple stuff here. It may not work in Firefox. It will work in Chrome, however, at least the visited link. So our first link is red. Just as it's on the page, it's red. 2 F's in the hexadecimal sequence of RGB. When it's visited, when we come back from that page, it should be green. R is 00, green is FF, blue is 00, so pure green. Now, when we hover over it, it should change to a purplish color. I can't remember if I changed it in the code or not, but all red, no green, all blue. Well, we know from grade school, right, that red and blue makes purple. So it should be a purplish color. Finally, when it's active, when we're clicking down on it, we're turning the background to solid blue. Okay, so let's check this one out. Whoops, again, this lag is killing me. So, yeah, I did change the background normally to like a peach color. When I hover over it, it changes it to a purple color. I've already visited Twitter on this video, so Twitter is green. They fixed that error in Firefox. And if I press down on it, notice that I've flipped the text to red and the background to a dark blue. Even if I'm got the left mouse down, that is a horrible combination. Don't put red on blue text, or red text on a blue background, rather, or for that matter, blue text on a red background. In the early days of the web, some people thought it was a really cool 3D effect. It's not, it's just stupid. So we're going to pull this out. We're going to go to Facebook real quick, even though I dislike Facebook. Come on. Oh, again, did I mention I was lagging? Let's see how many Facebook windows. Only one. There we go. I don't know why it says your health. I was probably showing somebody how to set the title tag. Anyway, that's how we use the pseudo classes. It's very, very simple, and we can use them on anything, like our table. And if you're almost done with assignment 5, this is what we're talking about when we set up a pseudo class for the table header, table row, and table data cell. So let's get rid of this. And we've only got a few more, and then we're going to cut off this video, and we'll come back with set 13 and talk about that. So we got 2 slides left in here, and let's talk about aligning our text on a page. Text align with a dash in between the 2 words is the way we do it. And basically, we can change the way our text looks inside of, say, a paragraph tag. There are 4 values we can choose from. Left justify is the way we're used to reading in the West. Right justified, your letters go from right to left. I know that Chinese language, Japanese language are just, that's the way they read. So if you've ever bought a translated book of what they call manga, which is basically a Japanese cartoon graphic novel, whatever you want to call it, you open what to us is the back of the book and start reading from right to left. Center is exactly what it sounds like. It centers the text inside of, for example, the paragraph tag that you've got this in. Justify is the one that you see a lot of times on academic papers and things like that, where the left side and the right side are actually straight up and down. Sometimes that can make words and letters kind of stretch or squish weird, but it seems to work for a lot of people. So let's take a look at what we're going to do the last slide, or the last example slide in this. Again, text CSS, TA CSS, but we're back to the little red pill. So what we're going to do up here is H1 is text aligned to the right. So our right-hand side is straight up and down, and our left-hand side is right. Our section, we have a text align of justify, and we're going to do an RGBA color here, which is red, because it's 255, 0 green, 0 blue. And then we've got a 50% transparency. So let's minimize that real quick, come back here, look at the last example for today. And you can see this is right justified. I've added some more text so you can really see it. The little red pill is right justified. Now, the thing is, no matter how much text I would add to the H1 tag, it would always grow from the right-hand side to the left. The paragraph down here, which is faded red, it's at whatever it was, 50 or 60 or 70%. That gives us that pinkish red color, and you can see the justification. It is literally straight up and down on the left side, straight up and down on the right side. There are no ragged edges, and that's what Justified does for us. Personally, I think this would be too long, didn't read, unless you break it up with some paragraphs. So that would be another thing that would make this a much better example. And then our small tag, we haven't done basically anything to it. So there we go. That's the last example for this particular set of slides. I do want to mention the last slide here. Let's get this bigified. And what we're talking about here are some extra CSS rules that you might find that you want to use. One I find I use a lot, because I'm an old traditional English person here, is text indent. And if you put that like in your div, every paragraph that you put in will have, I believe it's 8 spaces between the start of the paragraph and the first letter in the paragraph. White space, you know, we can make sticky white space. There's all kinds of different ways that we can use that. And if you want to know more about it, absolutely. Go to W3 Schools, type in white dash space CSS, and it'll tell you all about it. Text transform is one that I do use, not a lot, but somewhat. It will allow you to capitalize lowercase or uppercase letters. Text decoration is one you should remember, though, because text decoration allows us to pull the underlines out of anchor text, for example. It allows us to take a specific word or two in a paragraph using a span tag to maybe put an underline and an overline, or even to put our lines through text. Remember that strikeout that we talked about in HTML? This is how we get over that strikeout. And remember, there were like 3 tags, right? I'll let you go back and look them up. But there were 3 tags that basically did the same thing. Now, the last one up here that I need to kind of explain is word spacing and letter spacing. Basically, word spacing is how much space is between the end of this word and the beginning of the next word. Letter spacing is also called kerning, and that just means how close, for example, in the word letter there, the L and the ER. So again, that's one of those things that if you want to use something along those lines for your project text, absolutely, go for it. Play around with it and see what it does. As a matter of fact, if you want to, I would suggest strongly that you just create a test folder in public_HTML and that you build a series of pages just for fun, just to check out some of the CSS that we frankly don't have time to learn in class. We're going to come back and talk more about background, specifically background images. And if you remember the page that we were using here, how we can do this background image here with an inside box, so that rather than having to, you know, read slide 19 over this lace, which is a very busy background, we can actually quite easily see what's on the page here. We don't have to highlight everything just to read it. If you have to highlight it to read it, you've lost the internet. And I'll try and find a link to the old pages that I had with bad websites and update it and let you guys take a look at it. And then line height. Do you remember when we talked about the HTML tag for like H2O or A squared plus B squared equals C squared? I said at that time, it caused an extra little bump in between the line that is either above for the A squared or below for the H2O. Line height allows us to hide that bump by setting every single line to be slightly different. Well, not even slightly different, to be the same, but different. So you could do like a line height of 1.5, so that between every line, you've got that little bit of extra space so that the exponent or the subtext in H2O is gone. It's not really gone, it's just hidden with the line height attribute, but it's a pretty cool way to do things. CSS is almost always the best way to style your page. And by it's CSS, I mean an external CSS page. Because we can still use inline style, we can still use embedded style, but it's almost always better to utilize an external style sheet. That way, if you've got, start out with 3 pages and your website grows to 300, you can make the change in your external site or your external web, your external CSS file. It's been a long, long day. And that will make the change on every one of those 300 pages rather than you having to do it by yourself. So I think we're going to end it here for now. We'll come back with another one pretty soon. And I will see you guys at our Q&A on Thursday night at 5:30. So take care, have a great day, and if you have questions, you know what my email is. So take care. Stop sharing here and stop our